Hello and welcome to the Heatley Stand End podcast. Great to have your company for another episode. Plenty to discuss and cover today. And a big thank you to everyone who has been continuing the discussions across our socials, TikTok and Instagram. Make sure you give them a follow. Now, before we get stuck into today's podcast, I received a number of messages regarding my comments on Patrick Cripps and his reaction to that viral training clip. I think a number of people may have missed the point. I was actually highlighting Cripps's reaction as a deliberate media strategy set out by the club. George Hewitt was on 3AW's Wide World of Sport, and Brody Kemp was interviewed by Nick Butler on 10 Eyewitness News, and they were two other players who went down a similar path when being interviewed as Cripps did. A number of others commented on socials trying to claim that the training session in question was conducted in the afternoon on a hot day. That is not true. The players hit the track before 10 o'clock that morning, so it wasn't late in the day and it wasn't in the afternoon. Anyhow, love to hear from you. Leave a comment on our socials, Instagram and TikTok. Always happy to have a debate on any issue. Earlier this week, Michael Voss joined the Carlton Football Club's summer sessions for an in-depth interview and a look back at the pre-season so far. I thought it was a great insight into how the club and Voss have approached the pre-season. A few things that really stood out to me in the interview. Early on, he said that a clear focus over the pre-season was to shift the energy and take more ownership. I think this is the right thing to say publicly, and I guess we will be able to see whether that has actually come to fruition when the season proper starts. But one thing I did notice, having been at training over December and January, was that it was extremely evident that there was an air of positivity and fun around the group, especially in comparison to last year, which would have been really laborious and wouldn't have been a great environment. And it doesn't matter what industry you're in any workplace, if it is not a fun environment, well, then your productivity is going to be below par. So if Voss and the coaching staff can actually shift that energy and create positive vibes and improve on what we've seen in the past, well, then I think that it might have a positive benefit. We've seen Damien Hardwick heading into the 2017 season, Nathan Buckley heading into 2018, two coaches who really took a step back, delegated to their team, and had a real relaxed approach to their sides. Hardwick ended up winning a premiership in 2017 with Richmond, and Nathan Buckley, well, Collingwood were a kick away from the 2018 flag. Another takeaway from the Michael Voss video during the week was, I thought it was intriguing to see that they dealt with the speculation on Voss's future beyond this year. And I give credit where credit's due to the club for actually allowing that to be discussed on what is primarily a conversation video. It could have been very easy to just avoid the topic altogether. I know I have been critical of the club's media department on many occasions, but I thought owning that discussion backs up what Voss was saying, that everyone at the club actually needs to take greater ownership, and that includes Voss and his own coaching career. Make no mistake though, Michael Voss is coaching for his football life in 2026, and it raises two questions. One, is he up to the challenge? And two, what is the benchmark that will earn him a new contract? As we know, Voss, he's not someone who shies away from a challenge. He started his playing career all the way back in 1992 with the Bad News Bears. They were the laughingstock of the competition, and he and Robert Walls essentially led the Bears and later the Lions out of the wilderness and to 3 flags at the start of this century. From a coaching point of view, midway through 2023, the side was gone. They were stuffed. Finals looked impossible. It looked like he was about to be moved on. And then we know Camp Curnow occurred, and something just clicked, something intangible. And a sense of freedom was encouraged, and that freedom got the side on a run and almost a grand final berth. In terms of what confronts Michael Voss in 2026, is it finals or bust? Now, I preface this by saying that even a 9th or 10th place finish this year will mean the club has made finals. Is this enough for Voss to continue beyond this year? Given the reset, not just off the field, but on the field, and the personnel we have lost against the personnel who've come into the side for 2026, I think even qualifying for a wildcard spot is going to be a very difficult proposition. I think for the large part, Voss has been a pretty good public face for the club, though I think he needs to get better at including and embracing all players, rewarding form. So selection integrity has been a huge bugbear of mine for the last 3.5, 4 years. And he needs to start actually demoting out of form players. I think he can go a long way to rectifying the situation. I think he also needs to delegate to his assistants and allow a more collaborative approach in the coach's box. Now, in previous years, I would have said that Voss doesn't need to be a gun coach for us to succeed. We had more than enough talent in all areas of the field that doesn't matter who we came up against on a given day, we could really just turn it and dominate. Almost pretty similar to what Simon Goodwin had at Melbourne in 2021 with Prime Oliver, Gawn, Petrarca, Viney, May, Lever, and the list goes on. I think given where we are as a list at the moment, it's a transition. It's going to be very hard to see us going too far without some sort of coaching masterclass. Think Craig McRae or Sam Mitchell. As I mentioned in episode 1, my hope for this year is that we can actually unearth our next batch of stars. Carroll, O'Farrell, Cowan, Jagger Smith coming into the side, Jack Ison as well. If we can start to see that incremental improvement, is that enough for us to be pushing for a wildcard spot? Love your thoughts. Leave a comment on Instagram or TikTok. Is it finals or bust for Michael Voss? As we turn our attention to the intra-club that was played at Icon Park on Wednesday, one of the last fully fledged intra-club games before we play Brisbane next week and then Geelong the week after. Obviously, Patrick Cripps and Jacob Wiedering didn't play, given they've got state of origin commitments on Saturday. So Harry Mackay was busy with 3 goals. Jagger Smith, he was prominent along with Sam Walsh, who looks fully fit for the first time in a long time. And it was also interesting seeing the vision of Ben Ainsworth and Will Haywood really working well together. On a disappointing note, Matthew Carroll did his hamstring. From what I've seen of him over the pre-season, I would have said that he was a lock to play opening round against Sydney, but this will mean he's in a race to be fit. So we probably won't be seeing Matthew Carroll out on the field at the SCG in the first week of March. Some other news floating around today. One of the top names in the free agency conversation this year, Sam Walsh. There's news that he could potentially be signing a new deal prior to the start of the year. We know that he signed a 4-year contract in 2022, which means his current deal ends at the end of this season. AFL.com.au's Kel Toomey reported today that negotiations have really ramped up, and it looks like both parties are going to agree to a 7-year contract. That's going to be some positive news when that is made official. Now, the other bit of news this week was the annual general meeting held at Icon Park on Wednesday evening. I didn't attend. I'd advise you to go and have a look at Blue Abroad and Terry Degani's video where he gives an insight into what occurred at the AGM. Now, Josh Barnes' report on the Herald Sun on the AGM is very interesting. I'll read that verbatim, and it starts with, for Joseph Catrona, Wednesday's annual general meeting at Carlton was a chance to try and get some sort of justice for his friend Jim Latsonis. Latsonis was handed a 3-year membership ban by Carlton for what the club deemed threatening, aggressive and unacceptable behaviour at the last AGM. Catrona was also given a formal warning. As rain poured on the other side of windows looking over Icon Park, a distinct chill swept through the room and Catrona zeroed in on his target, club president Rob Priestley. Catrona said, "You suspended this guy Latsonis for 3 years. What sort of imbeciles are you?" Catrona said. "No wonder former board member Bruce Matheson called you a bunch of imbeciles. You are worse than that," Catrona also went on to say. Priestley kept his cool under the heat from the back row and noted that the club had had a number of other members who had made complaints about Latsonis' behaviour last year and that they needed to create an environment where everyone feels safe and respected. Josh Barnes reports that Catrona and Priestley's back and forth lasted more than 5 minutes, and as some of the AGM regulars called by name for Catrona, who is Josh Barnes goes on to report that Catrona's antagonistic style may have been over the top, but a contingent of the crowd of about 50 nodded along with his anti-board sentiment. Catrona finished by declaring that the club's brass is I quote, the worst board we have had, and finished by pointedly telling Priestley, don't get too comfortable because you won't be there long. Now, look, we all remember the graffiti left at Icon Park last year sacked the board, and they're pretty strong comments from a section of attendees at the AGM. I'm wondering, do you guys agree? Do you guys agree? Do we need a complete clean out of the board? Or do we need to stick fat? Or who else would you like to see join the board? Look, I don't necessarily agree with the sentiments of some of those patrons at the AGM on Wednesday night, but what I will say, for far too long, the Carlton Football Club board has been too much of a closed shop. I bring the example of the Independent Nominations Committee. This nominations committee is there to decide who is fit and worthy enough to take a seat at the board table. But my problem is that it's not independent because the president of the club chairs that committee. So how can you have an independent committee being chaired by the current president? It makes no sense. Luke Sayers was chair of that independent nominations committee. So was Mark Lejudice, and now Robert Priestley is as well. So I think there are too many hurdles to allow outsiders to actually take a seat on the board. I sense that a lot of the board members really want to protect their own patch and really try to fend off challenges from outside forces. Let me know what you think on Instagram and TikTok. Is Robert Priestley the best candidate to lead the Carlton Football Club forward as president, or is there somebody else that you'd like to see lead the club, like a Mike Fitzpatrick or even a Tom Elliott? Now, I know there are some elements of the Carlton community who would say no to a Tom Elliott presidency due to the fact that his father, John Elliott, who was president for 19 years, was involved in the salary cap scandal back in 2002. A lot of people have very long and haven't forgiven John Elliott for that. We were stripped of draft picks and it really put our club back quite some time. But Tom's his own man. He's a very smart individual. He's got a business background and he hosts a daily radio show on Melbourne's own 3AW. So now Tom, to me, would be a walk-up start to be president of the Carlton Football Club. And I think it'd be rather irresponsible not to actually even seriously consider him for the role of president in the future. Now, I don't have any inside knowledge here. I'm not too sure if he actually really wants to become president in the future. I'll try to get him on the podcast in the coming weeks and put that question to him and really ask him if he harbours those ambitions to follow in his father's footsteps. I'd be intrigued to see what he had to say. But in my own opinion, I think he would be a worthy candidate. He lives in Melbourne. He's passionate about the club and he's grown up with the club. And I think he has the correct acumen, business and also in the media, to really be a great figurehead for the Carlton Football Club going forward. Let me know what you think. Have your say on our socials, Instagram and TikTok, the Heatley Stand End. Would you like to see Tom Elliott potentially become a president of the Carlton Football Club, or perhaps someone like Mike Fitzpatrick? He's a Rhodes Scholar, was the chairman of the AFL for many years. He's only in his early 70s, so he's got plenty of time on his side. And I think he would also be another worthy candidate to potentially be the next president of the Carlton Football Club. That's all we have time for on the Heatley Stand End podcast for this week. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on Spotify and YouTube and stay connected with us on TikTok and Instagram. But until then, go Baggers.